Hey y'all, welcome to the Barefoot Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Cassie Hutton. Thanks for joining me today. I'm excited to have my guest speaker, Ashley Winning, on today. She is going to share how she, after two cesareans, she's from Australia, could not find a midwife in her area that would support a vaginal birth after a cesarean section, especially after two. And she goes into, probably not in this episode, but in the second or third episode, we just had such a great conversation that I had to break this one up into multiple episodes. But she had many things stacked against her, and she thought, if she was truly going to have the birth experience that she desired and that God built within her body to have, and the reason that she had that desire, then she was going to have to really take drastic measures to have the home birth that she wanted. And she started following some free birthers and ended up choosing with her third birth to have a free birth. In other words, an unassisted birth. And so follow us on this journey as she shares her story of the trauma that she experienced in the hospital with her first two births, and even after preparing for a VBAC with her second birth, how she still ended up having a C-section in the hospital, and how that journey led her on a healing journey. And then from there, how she advocated for herself, educated herself, and ended up taking her power back through a free birth, an unassisted birth at home with a doula there and her husband. Dive into this episode with us. But before we get into that, let's talk about the Beta Founding Members program for an Exodus birth. I really want you to join me in that. If you've been listening to the podcast and you've been in limbo mode about it, at least go ahead and sign up for my email so that you can hear even more from me about what I might teach in the Exodus birth class and what that's going to look like. Right now, if you join my beta program, in other words, you're going to be the first one to walk through this course with me. You're going to help me form this course. You're going to give me feedback on this course. You're going to say this should go there or that should go here. And you're going to get to see on the back end how I'm creating this course. And it's going to be offered at less than half price right now at this point. What you're going to get this course at for right now is way better than I'll ever be able to offer it, because I haven't put all the work into it just yet. You're going to walk through it with me as I put the work in, and we're going to decide together what's best for other women. And so if you want to help me launch that and help me go through that, all while also preparing for your own birth and getting the education and knowledge that I have applied to all of my 5 home births, I want to relay that to you, not only as part of my ministry, but also as I'm building a business and trying to do all the things as a stay-at-home mom. I need you to come alongside me, and you need me to come alongside you so that we can learn from each other. And we cover everything. If you haven't already heard this, we cover everything from mindset and nutrition to how to partner with Jesus and to pray for your birth. I teach you relaxation techniques. What woman doesn't want to learn how to have a less painful birth, a pain-free birth, how to release oxytocin and all of those endorphins that actually are natural painkillers in your body that God designed and put into your body so that you don't have to have the painkillers and the synthetics from the hospital. This course is for any Christian mama who wants to pray through her birth and be empowered through education and God's word. So in the show notes, I've included the link for the sales page for this course so that you can go read all about it and make sure if it's for you or not for you. I tried to put every single detail into it, including the price and everything that we're going to walk through together, what you can expect from me, what I can expect, what I need from you as well. So that's all in the show notes below in the sales page. Go check it out, and let's dive into this episode. Welcome to the Barefoot Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Cassie Hutton. I help Christian moms have a home birth they desire through education and the Word. If you're an old soul that is passionate about restoring godly wisdom and disconnecting from this interconnected world, then you're in the right place. Let's discuss godly restoration through the 5 H's of home: home birth, homeschool, homemaking, homemade, home remedies, and health. All right, welcome back to another episode of Barefoot Parents. I'm so excited to be here with you to start another birthing series. We went through one birthing series last year, and obviously it was just spurred on by my 4th home birth and Harper's home birth, and you can go back and listen to her story and a few of the other
birth stories on this podcast if you just scroll on down. So today I'm here with Ashley Winning, and I'm really excited to talk to her. This is really the first person that I'm talking to one-on-one to get her free birth experience, and just I'm just so excited to ask you all of the questions, Ashley. So let me go ahead and introduce you, and let's
Mm.
just dive right into this. And for those out there that don't know what free birth is, it is an unassisted birth. So in other words, Ashley did not have any medical attendee that she hired to be a part of her birth, to do all the prenatal appointments, and then to be at her birth. So she took care of all of that on her own. And so we're going to go into all of that. So Ashley is a, see, now I'm messing up my words, but okay. So Ashley hosts a home birth mentoring group and program for women to get guidance and knowledge on their birth. You can join her on that and find her on Facebook, but you're mostly on Instagram. And so you can tell us what your handle is. And you're also the host of, tell us what your podcast is and where everyone can find you.
My podcast is called the VBAG Home Birth Stories podcast. And so I do live on Instagram. I do have a Facebook, but I'm not, so I did get banned on Facebook for sharing too many birthing photos. I got red listed for about a year, so I moved to Instagram. And so far, so good. It's been a really great space to be, but you can just send me a DM if you want to chat or find out. But I've got my podcast called the VBAC Home Birth Stories podcast, and I do have that group program that I open the doors every quarter. I've always got freebies, like free workshops and things like that too, which is a great space to be able to connect with me there as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast too,
Oh,
Cassie.
yeah. Well, I'm so glad you reached out to me because it was just kind of a God thing, I feel like, because I'm working with my nutritionist, and that was even a God thing too, because
Mm,
her mom and dad all had free births. And as I'm working with my nutritionist on my health, I was just kind of like floored. Not floored, but like a little bit amazed that like I would connect with a nutritionist whose mother had all free births, you know? I mean, that's just a little
mm,
bit unheard of. I mean, it's not, I mean, they probably came from maybe the hippies era, but she's the same age as I am. So it's not like if I
mm,
put her parents at the same age as my parents, you know, the mindset there just is quite a bit different. And so I even just emailed her one day. I was like, look, can I just talk to your mother? Because had a few questions.
mm.
And she was like, well, I don't know that my parents really planned or like prepared or really like just discussed this whole free birth thing. It was what it was. And they just were kind of like, not that I encourage this at all, but just kind of like, well, God will just take care of everything. And, for them, fortunately, it sounds like it did. And they had wonderful births. And so when you reached out to me, it was about the same timing. It was just within a few weeks of that. And so I was like, wow, this is really cool that because I posted that post on that podcast group months ago. I mean, a long time
Mm,
ago. So for you to run across it was pretty cool.
hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting because I put myself out there wondering if people know what free birth is, wondering if, home birth and free birth's too taboo. But interestingly enough, there's enough people out there who are actually interested in this. And when you start putting yourself out there, they just magically sort of appear in your life, don't they?
Yeah, it is really interesting.
Mm,
So why don't you start with your stories of what happened with your first two births, and then we'll kind of stop there because I'll probably have a lot of questions for
yeah.
you. So yeah, tell us what happened with your first birth.
I'm going to give you a really condensed, quick overview brief, which is still probably going to be about 15 minutes. But normally, if I go into all detail, it takes about 90 minutes or at least 60 minutes. So
Yeah.
essentially, I went in to the hospital system. Here in Australia, we have public hospital systems, or you can go private. Majority of us will go with public. And so I just went to the GP and had some tests done before I got pregnant. Everything was fine, very healthy. I'm a bigger woman, so he just said to me, you may have trouble conceiving. I didn't have trouble conceiving. I fell pregnant like first time, and I was super excited. Bit worried about miscarriages because so many women around me in my workspace had miscarriages, and so I was just so excited to meet my baby already. It was a conscious conception. I had planned for this baby. My husband and I were getting married the next month. It was just a wonderful, exciting journey for us. And so I went to the GP around about 16 or maybe like 14 weeks near my work, and he said, because you are bigger, you'll need to get the GTT test for gestational diabetes. And I went down that route. I was very sick when I had that test done. I had HG, so I was vomiting a lot. I had to keep that sugary drink down. I was pretty much like almost passing out because I have rolly veins. So when the pathologist tries to get my veins, they actually kind of move out of the way. And she wasn't very confident in getting the bloods. And I also am empathic, so I could feel her energy. So I was like sweating. I was sick. I was trying to, like, she said to me, if you don't keep that sugar stuff down, you've got to come back and do this. So I was like very much of the mentality of keep this down, be strong, be resilient. You don't have to go through this again. And I ended up having to lay down because I was freaked out so much by some of those experiences of having the needle done. But I went back to the GP and he said to me that no gestational diabetes. And then I got sent into the hospital. It pretty much, there was no discussion about choices or birth spaces. I didn't understand what my options were. And then when I went to that hospital, they said I had gestational diabetes, which I was completely shocked.
Oh, wow.
They hadn't actually told me.
Yeah.
They assumed I knew.
So let me ask, so to pause on that, because I'm in such this like nutrition phase and learning all the things. So you, and for our listeners out there, we did not introduce that you are from Australia. Obviously,
Yes.
you have an accent, but
Yes.
so that our listeners know, not only she's not from the U.S., and so the language might be a little bit different there, as far as the terminology. Um, but on that drink, so is this the same orange drink that we would get here in the United States?
I think so, yeah. So a really sugary,
yeah,
high sugar.
So very sugary,
disgusting,
yes.
yeah.
And so for listeners out there, there are so many other better options. What's in that drink is actually very bad for your body. It has tons of food coloring in it. It has like 50 times the amount of sugar that you would actually sit down at a normal meal and eat. So it's kind of incredibly insane that we're actually testing women this way. Not only that, but just the actual physiological process that a woman's body goes through. It's normal. It is completely normal for a woman's body. You are supposed to become insulin resistant during pregnancy. That's a part of the process for a healthy baby and for a healthy mama. And so it's normal for the change, but all of a sudden, and I don't know the history on this, maybe you do, but all of a sudden we kind of learn these things through studies and different observations, and so all of a sudden, then we have to create these tests for these women to go through, and then to jack the sugar up so much and actually make women so nauseous by taking this drink. I've never taken the drink personally, thank goodness. Because I went with midwives, they were already a little bit more naturally minded. And so my first gestational diabetes test that I did, I was given this crazy meal to eat. And I could still feel that sugary, just too many carbs in my diet. And I wasn't given that huge amount of sugar. I was just given a lot of carbs, or I had to eat them. I had to kind of prepare the meal myself. So it's very interesting. Go do your research on what's actually in it. The Natural Minded Mama has a really good post on Instagram about what's in it, the amount of sugar that's in it, and then also different things you can do to still test for gestational diabetes. That will be approved, and your doctor should be fine with you taking these other much cleaner tests.
Yeah. Exactly. Look, there's a couple of really good podcast episodes on gestational diabetes by the Midwife's Cauldron podcast and also the Great Birth Rebellion. They have 2 podcast episodes that talk about the evidence. It also talks about the fact that even though we've identified these women as having gestational diabetes, there's no better outcomes for mothers or babies by treating them that way. If anything, you're having poorer outcomes in
Mm-hmm.
birth because of those things, because of the high intervention numbers and things like that. So even though they're trying to stop a problem, they're creating problems. You're better off just, not even, you'll hear about it in my journey anyways. But so I ended up having that. So I went through the obstetrician route. I thought I was getting the best care I could get, and I was public. So I was like, I'm getting the best care for free. This is awesome. It didn't feel awesome. It felt really cold and clinical. And I ended up being told I'm going on insulin. I had to go to all these extra appointments. I'm going to be induced at 38 weeks. They never talked about birth, or I would ask questions like, what's going to happen here? And would you do this? And would you do that? And it was always, we'll talk about that later. And I went into the induction not realizing that induction can fail, just expecting my baby to be born that day. And we found that it was a 3-day process of nothing happening. My body would refuse. I didn't look at it this way then, but I look at my body now as like an amazing powerhouse that could not be broken open. And it refused to do what they wanted me to do. And then when I was going through the process, I was exhausted. I was tired. I felt like a failure. I wasn't sure I could give birth vaginally because the pain was so excruciating, having to have someone put his fingers up, a doctor, to do the balloon catheter by day 3. And the night before I'd had, a cannula in my arm, which made it hard to go to the toilet with the balloon in there. And it was just a very, for the days before that, I'd had midwives putting their fingers up my cervix to put gels on, and I had to have continuous monitoring on my back, heavily pregnant. It was just not a positive, happy experience. And I ended up waking up 6 o'clock the next morning. They said, oh, it hasn't fallen out. So essentially after me saying, they said they want me to come back in a day for more monitoring, come back on Monday for the induction process to happen again. And I said, can I just come back when I'm in labor? And they said, no, you have to do this. And so I said, well, I don't think that that's like the right thing to do. Why would it work today when it didn't work? Why would it work tomorrow when it didn't work today? Like, why wouldn't you allow me to have time? So she went away and had a chat, and they came back and said, well, look, we think you should probably just have a C-section. We've bumped all of the people. And I said, okay, fine. Well, I'll do that then if that's what you think I should do. It was a very scary experience. It was a very disconnecting experience. I had never had medications before, really, outside of just Panadol. I've never been ill. I've never had any health complications. I've never even broken an arm before. So it was very surreal, crazy, scary experience for me. The midwife who was in there said, you look like a deer that's in headlights. And I was like, because I literally feel like I am. There was all these lights shining on me. It was cold. There was all these doctors around. They were about to perform major surgery across my belly, and I had never considered surgical birth as a way to birth my child. I thought that was for posh celebrities who just wanted to schedule in birth. I thought that that was for people who truly needed emergency C-sections. That wasn't something that was going to happen to me. No woman in my lineage had gone through that line actually needing it, you know what I mean? So it was a very interesting process. I felt like a failure afterwards. So I struggled with breastfeeding and all of these things. And then I decided I was going to advocate and fight for myself to have a VBAC the next time. I waited 24 months in between births. That's all I knew that I had to do from a what you must do before we look at you as a, consider you. And I went through the same process, same hospital. And I thought, if I'm informed, if I'm educated, we're going to have an informed consent, we're going to talk about this like adults, and then they're going to support me, is what I thought. I'm going to get a doula. I'm going to get a student midwife. I'm doing all the things everyone's telling me to do. And they said to me, look, we do think VBAC is the safest way to birth, but just not for you because of your size. And I was like, okay. So we had many, many conversations about my size, being a bigger woman, being a bigger BMI woman, and navigating so many dead baby stories, so many this, so many that. I didn't get gestational diabetes the first time this time, but I got it later on through a test. And I failed on one of the tests like 0.01 or something. It was stupid. I could have retested. If I could go back, I wouldn't even bother testing. You know, it's just another hoop that they kind of, it's not a great thing to have that smashed on your book that you've got GD. It's another way to kind of
Yeah.
pigeonhole you into a certain way. So I advocated
Yeah.
for spontaneous birth. I wanted a vaginal birth, and I didn't want continuous monitoring, but I was willing to compromise on that. And I wasn't doing any growth scans. I had a 3.7 kilo baby at 38 weeks. I thought this one might be 4 kilos. I'm happy with that. And I thought, even if it's up to 4.5 kilos, I'm happy with that vaginally. So I said, I'm not doing it. And we had many, many conversations, and I found out that they were really worried, like if I was to need an emergency C-section, that the junior doctors wouldn't be capable of cutting into the extra fat tissues, and they would want a senior on staff. And I said, well, I'm not going to have a surgery or a plan to have an induction, which caused the surgery in the first place, so that you guys have got staff lined up. I said, if it's a staffing issue, send me to a tertiary hospital so that I can have senior obstetricians on call if in the rare instance that I actually need a cesarean section. And they laughed at me. It was about 25 weeks that they kind of laughed at me. And I thought, well, obviously these things aren't an issue. Like, they're not worried. If they want me to have continuous monitoring, I'll do it. If they've got them for water, because I want to go in the shower. They said, we've only got 4 in the hospital. I said, well, if you want me to wear them, then you're just going to have to make sure that you've got one available for me. Otherwise, we're going to do intermittent monitoring, okay? And so it was just having those sorts of conversations. But by 37, 38 weeks, they called me and said, we're not willing to take the risk of you on, and so you need to choose from this hospital or this hospital. And I was like, well, nothing's actually changed. It's just that you couldn't fearmonger me into doing what you wanted me to do. And I felt really vulnerable. It was super scary. And I felt like I had to compromise then on some of those things, because what was the next level? Like, were they going to kick me out of hospital altogether? Like, I was really frightened. So I did compromise. The hospital was a bit nicer, but essentially they wanted me to do all the same things as the other hospital. They just were not as aggressive or blunt about the way that they delivered. They spoke in a more delicate way and more supportive way. They did agree that a vaginal birth was the best and safest way for me to birth my baby. And I ended up having a stretch and sweep, went into labor a couple of days later, came in, spontaneous labor. I was 5 centimeters by the time I got in there, which was a couple hours into labor. I was laboring really well, and then the midwife, I said to her, I think my waters have broken a little bit, like I can feel a little bit of slimy thing. And she said, well, do you want to lay down and I'll check you? And I said, yeah, okay. I mean, I was pretty excited. I couldn't believe I'd gone into spontaneous labor to begin with. There's a lot of fear and worry about, can I even do this thing, after hearing them for 9 months tell me I can't, that I have to be induced.
Yeah. And how many weeks were you at this point?
I was 40 weeks on the dot.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was a lot of stress in my mind about, oh, if I don't go into labor by 42 weeks, I've got to do this. So it was great to go into spontaneous labor before then. And they wanted me to have an epidural as soon as I got into the hospital, because I'm big again. And I, refused that. I spoke with the anesthesiologist, and it was just, some bigger people have a big fat layer over their spine. But for me, there's no fat layer over my spine. They can easily get a needle in. And so when they told me that, they said, well, we still recommend you have an epidural on arrival though. I said, okay, thanks. So I was just making sure that I understand the reasons for their
Yeah, that's what
recommendations,
I'm
and it was
curious
more just
about.
policy and
Okay.
just how they treat women like me, essentially. They just want to manage us as much as they can to get us into the surgery as quickly as possible, so we don't get down the line too quickly, I think. And so the midwife said, yeah, your waters have broken, but there's a 4 bag. So do you want me to break that? I said, yeah, fine. If they're already gone, I suppose. And then she broke them, and actually my waters hadn't gone. I just had a small leak, tsunami of water everywhere, a lot of pain straight away, like waters breaking was very painful for me. I think she ended up putting the screw on my baby's head, and I think that's why she was encouraging breaking those waters as well, because up until that point I'd had no doctors come in, no interventions or anything. I was just doing everything on my own, and really well too. And I think I kind of got out of that free flowing, standing up in the being active to on my back in pain, got this up me now, attached to a monitor, get down off the bed, and I had a decel, or the baby had a decel that didn't recover as quickly as I'd like. So all these people rushed in and talking C-section straight away and blah, 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 blah. And pretty much the rest of I think I went on labouring for maybe an hour after that. Then I asked for an epidural. That came in very quickly. Then I was stuck on the bed, and I negotiated for myself vaginal examinations to be every hour, because I thought that that'll give me some more time. Surely I was already 10 centimetres one side, 8 centimetres another side. The baby was ansenlytic. Baby was ROT. This is what I was being told by the obstetricians. And I was like, what does all this stuff mean? Like, I'm almost 10 centimetres. Like, baby just comes out at this point, right?
Yeah.
So I'd spent so much time advocating for no induction and all this that I didn't understand anything that they were talking to me about. But I just thought, there's nothing wrong with me or baby, so why are we trying to push me into a surgery? Baby's just going to come out my vagina. And they just kind of looked at me like, you could be in labor for days. Like, we don't know. And it was just this, we just think you should have surgery, because if you don't have surgery now and you wait later, there could be a problem in surgery. And so that's kind of what they kept talking to me about. And I just felt really trapped and alone. I had my doula with me, but I couldn't move or do anything. And I felt really trapped at that point. And what I learned later was that they don't actually do VEs. They usually do them like every 4 hours. So here's me getting them every hour. And then every hour they get an opportunity to say, oh, baby hasn't moved, nothing's changed, nothing's working, blah, 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 introducing potential infections, blah, blah, blah. And that's just like negative compounding on top of you, right? So after about 6 hours of that, I eventually, we had a couple more decels, and I eventually said, okay, fine, I'll go in for a C-section. And off I went. And the thing that they were worried about happening actually happened, which was my baby, when they pulled her out, she actually tore my uterus, allegedly. And so I had a special scar down to my cervix. It tore right through my cervix. So then I had to have my baby and husband rush out, and then a new team come. I was in there for over 3 hours. I wanted to be put under, but there was a big discussion about whether that was safe or not. And so it was a very traumatic experience for me, having to be awake while I could feel the energies of these people. They were having debates and almost like mini arguments about what they should be doing. And it just felt really emergency-like. I lost 3.1 litres of blood, and yeah, it was just a really horrible, dreadful experience. I was told never to labour on that again, and that I need to have C-sections, but I can have 2. So along came my planning for my free birth at that stage.
All right, guys, we're going to stop the podcast right there and take a pause. We're going to come back and share the rest of Ashley's story, and actually 2 more parts, if not another one, because our conversation was just so good. And she has a lot of knowledge about birth and has gone through a lot. And so have a lot of other women. Maybe you are listening to this and going, yep, I went through that too. Yep, I went through that too. And I hope that you find Ashley's story very encouraging, that your body does know what to do and how to birth babies. So stay tuned. We'll see you on the next episode of Ashley's story. Are you enjoying this podcast? I sure hope you are. If you are, please let me and others know by leaving a review wherever you listen from. Are you interested in a topic I've covered so far and want more? Please leave a comment or message me at contact@cassiehutton.com. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Barefoot Parenting. If what you're doing works for you, is healthy for your family, and is growing you in the ways you need to grow, then it's time to step out of the feeling of guilt and shame and wear your Barefoot Mama badge proudly. Remember, barefoot parents are doing things differently, so be encouraged today. If you're feeling the pushback in your parenting style, you're doing something right.